Okay, well, welcome everyone to the third installment of the Open Tech Edinburgh scene, TOTES for short. So those of you who might not have come before, we are meeting every month, talking mainly about open source, open hardware, open technology, open data, communities, trying to get into that open topic and sort of start discussions around it, and also have fun, meet up and chat. We're running it currently monthly, trying to operate on a basis of lightning talks, full talk, lightning talks, full talk. The idea is that those who have a topic, they'd like to speak about it, but maybe not too much, they get a shot of that at lightning talks. It can be as beginner, introductory, or cursory as you want. Or an advanced thing as a teaser to, and if you would like to hear me talk more about this, encourage the organisers to book me at a full talk. And then every 3 months we can have a full talk and do a more deep dive into a particular topic too. And so this month we have our first full talk given to us by Douglas McCallum about GraphQL. I had a quick look up about it. REST killer was. I thought this was sort of an already established thing, as everything is REST now, and apparently not. There's this new thing, GraphQL, and I'm quite excited to learn about it. So, without further ado, can we please welcome Douglas?
Right. No, I'm not standing in his way. Right, questions were going to come in the next slide, but they're going to start now, because all the best talks have questions. Trouble is, so does the rubbish ones. Ada, quick hands up, who here has used Ada? Bloody hell. I should really stick my hand up too. MD, not know what it is? Okay. Back in 1978, the US Department of Defense decided to work out how many different languages they were using for all their various software projects. And after 4 years, somebody came back and said it's 452. So they thought, this is a bit silly, let's make it 1. So Ada was born, and Ada, the computer press in the early 80s essentially said, if you don't know Ada, you're not going to work anymore. And one hand goes up to say used Ada, which shows how true that was. Ada, it tried to do everything and be real time at the same time. The only thing it's ever used for nowadays is air traffic control. So planes don't crash that often, so it probably does work. It's just that nobody uses it. The next wonderkind bit is there's a thing called the Gartner hype cycle, which they produce every year, where you have a sort of graph of, it starts off with stuff that's new and wonderful and witty that nobody's ever heard of, and it builds up to they call it the peak of hope, and then it goes down to the trough of despair, and then you have the plateau of usefulness. And things which are on the first bit of the going up hype cycle quite often don't get beyond the top of the bit, they just disappear off into the thing. Ada being a good example. AI the first time around. AI's been around 3 times. Virtual reality has been around at least twice. It's like 3D films. Every 20 years somebody thinks, hey, 3D films, this is new, people will love it. And people say, fuck off. So the question is GraphQL going to slide back down the slope of hope? I don't think so, but time will tell, as with all these things. And there was the questions. Right. The first question is, who here has written an API? Who here has used an API? Right. Big problem with APIs. I do a lot of stuff with hotel property management systems. Is this the video is going to go out on YouTube?
It is going out on YouTube as we speak.
I will not, in that case, not slander anybody. There are some big names in the hotel property management system, some of whom do a database that's the #1 database too. And they're shit. They haven't a fucking clue. This is a property management system called Oracle. When you call Oracle to say, give me a reservation, this is what it gives you. And when I'm calling the reservation, I'm looking for the room number. That's it. So I've gone through hundreds of lines of shite just to get a room number. And that's the problem with APIs, is you get the lot, whether you want it or not. So what happened was somebody at Facebook thought, this is a bit silly, let's even do it a different way. So GraphQL was originally designed in, I think the work started in 2012, and they had a proper working version they could give to other people in 2015. And they open sourced it at that point, and then transferred it to the GraphQL Foundation. So it isn't done by the evil empire anymore, or whatever you want to call Facebook. I suppose Google is the evil empire, Facebook just has to be, I don't know.
Google is the Borg.
Could be, yes. Good point, yes, could be the Borg. So, because one of the problems with hotel property management systems is there's a mob called the Hotel Technology Next Generation, who are now called the Hospitality Technology Next Generation, who haven't even got a certificate for their website, which shows how clued up they are. Back in 2002, when they started up, the bloke who started, a bloke called Douglas Rice, went up Mount Ararat to speak to God. And God gave him the commandments. And commandment number 1 was, thou shalt use soap. And commandment number 2 was, that's it.
Be as verbose as possible.
Soap is shit. I fucking hate it.
Do you remember Corba?
No.
Soap is the improvement on Corba.
Right. My way of looking at soap is Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, guitar, mouth organ, is a genius. And if he had gone to the extra effort of a couple of cymbals between his knees and a big drum in his back, would he have got a Nobel Prize? And that's the thing about Microsoft, they can't leave anything alone. If something's vaguely good, they'll just fuck it up by adding stuff that you don't need. Anyway, so Facebook came along and thought, APIs are shit. There is still use for APIs, but I have now gone over to GraphQL from APIs. I like GraphQL, it's actually very good. So, what is it? It is not a library, it's not something you can go and download. Similarly, it is a schema-based query language. All it is a specification. And then it's up to people to make an implementation. So the implementation, you'll get Python implementation and a PHP implementation and a Rust implementation, which is all done by different people, none of whom speak to each other. There's even a COBOL implementation of GraphQL, which is going some, I think. There is actually a COBOL web server called Wheelchair, which is possibly going even more. So whatever you want, most languages will have a GraphQL implementation, which is a case of just downloading that. Trouble is, not all implementations are created equal, because the implementations are up to how much of the specification people decide to do. And there's a major part of the specification that a lot of people miss out. Luckily, it's quite easy to get around. So, a schema. You have structure, you have 5 basic types of building blocks of data. So you've got strings, you've got ints, which is another slide. So you just define a record. This is a whole schema. This is a schema I use for saving transactions that you're getting back from a payment system. So you tend to have 2 types. You've got queries and you've got mutations. There's only 2 things. Well, there's 3 things you can do with GraphQL. You can do a query, which gives you data back. You can do a mutation, which changes stuff and gives you data back if you want. And there's a thing called a subscription, so you can subscribe to it and say, when it changes, let me know. But again, as not all implementations are created equally, that's the thing people tend to leave out and do last. Because it's a pain in the arse doing WebSockets to speak to the world. And then for mutations, which is the changing stuff, you just have, again, you type sort of input defines structures that can only be input into mutation. Types define structures that can only come out of a query or an implementation. Because you see they've got new transaction, which is the stuff going in, and transaction, which is the stuff coming out. The other thing about it is the exclamation mark. The exclamation mark is optional. What the exclamation mark means is whatever you send back must not be null. So it can be a zero-length string, or 0 as an integer, or 0.0 as a floating point, or false as Boolean. But I have yet to see any example of GraphQL where people don't bother with the exclamation marks. Which makes you think you should really have it the other way around, because if the default shouldn't be having to add something extra, the default should be the minimum you need. So, what can you do? Queries and mutations, plus subscriptions, which we'll just ignore because this would then go on for an hour. So, there is a query. So I'm getting the users, I want their name, their age, and the email. Going back to that hotel management system shit, I would get a huge long page of crap. Doing it this way, I would just say room ID, because that's all I'm interested in. Pass in a booking reservation number, and you get back the room ID. How the hell did I do that?
When it started searching, I think.
Ah, there are. So into the get users bit, you can also pass parameters. Like if you want to do authentication with an API key, you can do it in there.
So the call is saying that it expects these results as opposed to these are parameters.
Yes, the parameters go in the round brackets. The results go between the squiggly brackets afterwards. Those are the fields you want. You can also have a return structure can also have other structures embedded in it. And then you'd say put squiggly brackets in and then the fields you want out the embedded structures if you wanted the embedded structures.
So this is something like select name, age, email from the users.
Yes. Except there's no database. And then, like a proper program, it replies in JSON, always replies in JSON, which is quite useful. Because the world has moved on to JSON, whereas the hotel business hasn't. Even Oracle are moving on to doing a JSON version of their horrendous crap. So again, you specify what you want. Name, age, Fred. And right, I've missed something out here. Get queries. When you're returning something, like the transaction, this bit here, if you put square brackets around it and put an exclamation mark, you mean you want an array back, which is a bit I forgot, but it comes up later on, but not as such. So, get users and you get stuff back. So again, you can call it if you just want the email, and it will just give you the email. So the data types, int is signed int 32. So if you want to do 64-bit ints, somebody has to implement it within that implementation of GraphQL. The various language ones, you tend to find the people who implement the GraphQL make up the standard types that you have within that language. So you'll get int 64s and you'll get complex and stuff like that. The other thing about strings is the format is dependent on the other, but it always expects it to come back as Unicode. That's one thing they say. Though, if they give you something else, tough. You're going to have to convert it. If Float is double position as in IE 754. Boolean is true, false. ID is a thing, it's just an ID really. It looks and behaves like a string. So it can be random characters, don't expect it to be human readable. That's what they specifically say in the specification. But nobody ever uses IDs other than identifiers, so nobody cares.
As a question, this is all supposed to be over HTTP, ergo a string? No?
No. It does not have to go over HTTP.
Okay.
You can use RabbitMQ or gRPC or whatever you want.
And the transport, the data layer could be binary, could be text-based, or is it assuming Unicode text-based as your...
It's always Unicode. What it sends back will be JSON, no matter how the implementation is done. So there's lots of people implementing to do if they support HTTP or RabbitMQ or anything they want. Most people just...
UTF-8.
Sorry?
By Unicode you mean UTF-8?
Yeah. They actually say Unicode in the specification. So I'll use their words. Get the world has moved on. There are two variations of structures, type and input. Input is only going into mutations. Type is coming back from a query or a mutation. You don't have to declare a type coming back from the thing. If you want, you can declare an array of strings or just a single string. It's up to you. Type. So they're just a record with the exclamation mark defining everything. You can also put filters in when you're doing your query. So you can say, I want a picture size of 600, and it will then pass that parameter into the query, and then you return stuff that passes that request. Oops. And then names, there's an example of an array. So we're just getting back an array of strings which cannot be null. And there's an input. This goes into your mutation. Again, exactly the same stuff as types. When you're declaring them, you have to declare them in a block within your schema, which we'll go back to. So you have the block of queries there. So all your queries go under type query, and you just list, 25, 32, however many queries you've got. And it's the same for mutations. You declare them in a little block. Because what almost every implementation of GraphQL does, it has a code generator. And you edit your schema, and as you add a new mutation, you run your code generator, and the code generator will generate the call and the sort of wrapper function that you need to act on that call, which I'll show you a wee bit later, what it actually does. So what we've got to. Yeah, so you declare queries. So your parameters can be as many as you want. Don't care. And then what you get back, you can add various things. You always get back whatever it is plus an error. And then the error tells you in the JSON, it goes, error! Stop it! You buggered it up. So there's an example. Put your offspring in, because I didn't want to put an example of the stuff I use, because no point giving away your API key to the world. Similarly, the hotel names. And this example mutation, update one housekeeping, which is, what they have is, they all do it in a bloody stupid way. Trying to think how to say this and not end up in court. In housekeeping hotels, you generally have several states, like is it clean, is it dirty, does it need a sheet change, is it out of service, whatever. And the call you get back bears no resemblance to what the housekeeping people put in. So the housekeeper will have a little code which is clean, and then a description like room is clean. When you call an England-based property management system, you say, give me the room status. It doesn't give you back the code, it gives you back a number. And you have to know which numbers apply to which codes. Because I don't know why. They don't pay testers, that's all I can say. If they do pay testers, they pay the wrong testers. So there's an example of mutation. So I'm just want to update num 1300, the text we stay or the code stay, and clean is false. Because you don't want to give somebody, when they're checking in, you don't want to give them a dirty room. Unless they have specialized tastes. So, using in the when you run your code generator, this is Go. The code generator will take the schema, which see if I've got it. Oh, let's update one housekeeping. So I've declared that as mutation, and it's gone in and then created this thing, and you do the little bit with the return. So you call your own little function to do all the stuff you need to do from the parameters you get passed in. They have mutation resolvers and query resolvers. Never looked at them, don't care, they work, leave it alone. And for some reason in Go they always want pointers returned. Don't know why, that's just the implementation I use. As I said, they're all not created equally. So the return DB at the housekeeping, in this case, it goes off and interrogates an API, which I think sits in Azure somewhere. So the stuff you call does not have to be within the program. You can call external stuff, interpret it, and then pass back the stuff that's wanted. And then there's the same for requests. So, we're getting to the bit which you never ever, I've watched a lot of GraphQL talks and nobody ever explains this bit. Has anybody ever used that command?
Except for the typing input.
Apt install typing imp.
Sorry.
No? Okay, how about this Amazon service?
Which will be signed up for that.
No? Right, because I will show you a live example, because Britain's Got Talent doesn't do ritual public humiliation anymore. They're sort of vaguely nice to people. So I'll do a live demo and we'll get the ritual public humiliation when it doesn't work. But when you have a schema, one of the beauties of GraphQL is by building up your schema of stuff, you get something that you can call and something you can type into in the playground. So you can test all your calls by typing stuff into a browser window, and it comes back saying, yeah, that looks like it's working okay. But nobody works that way. That's what the typing imp is for. It takes the stuff that you normally type into the little window and converts it into a call for the GraphQL. So, the secret bit, this is insider knowledge nobody else wants to tell you. On your HTTP request, you set your content type to be application/JSON. And then you have what is really a GraphQL query, JSONified. So you can say it's a query, and then the stuff is everything else. So you have to escape your double quotes so it doesn't think that's the end of the JSON thing. And then that will work. You can send that off to your GraphQL implementation, and it'll go, aha, I know what they want.
Is that squiggly res links logins bracket? That's not JSON on itself.
That's a quote.
Yeah.
So I've got a query, which is
which is the GraphQL level.
Yeah, and the bit in double, because it's all in double quotes,
Mm-hmm.
that's the string that goes along with the query. So your GraphQL interpreter takes that in, because they all recognize JSON, application/JSON as a content type, builds that into the GraphQL query language, and then sends you back the JSON. it was a lot of working out to find out how to do that. So I've saved you hours, so you can be eternally grateful. Now, there is also a defined content type called application/GraphQL. Not many people implement it, which you'd think they would, because as you'll see in a moment, the way the query playground works. So again with GraphQL, there you have exactly the same query, it's just not JSONified. So you've got no double quotes around the squiggly bracket residence logins, and no escaping of the quotes in the auth string. So if we go back, so you can see the differences. So it's not much work to take your GraphQL query and make it into a JSON thing. It's really just a case of putting quotes around almost everything. Now, ritual humiliation time. Nothing quite like a demo to give people a laugh. Right, I shall sit here. If you're lucky, you'll see it too. Right.
Is it high enough resolution for you there?
It's a bit overwhelming. But, right, so here we have, this is a bloke called Trevor Blaze who has this, he's put up a GraphQL thing called countries.
I don't suppose you could cause a zoom in there, or is that going to be a problem with the demo?
I know what to do. Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay. So again, this playground bit comes with every GraphQL implementation once you've built it with the code generation thing. You just run it and listen. That's the thing I forgot to mention. In GraphQL, there are two endpoints. One is / query. There is none of this API different endpoints for different stuff. It's the query that determines what it does rather than the endpoint. And it just makes it easy to remember what the stuff is. So with the playground, it is documenting. So here we have stuff. Is it recognized like continent? And I can see this. Let's go back. God, it's a bit big. Shit.
If you want to zoom out,
Yeah,
whatever makes sense.
I'll have to command minus it again. You know what? Yeah, we can move it out. So you can see here the query continents brings back an array of continents. Similarly, the array of countries, or the call of countries, brings back an array of country. And you can see from here, country, these are all the things you get back in a country. So if we're interested in the phone number, so I'll run this query. So run the query. There it is, name, capital, etc. And I do phone. Luckily, it's auto completion for you. And then, oomph, there it is with the phone number. And all the work to decide what's coming back to you is done at the GraphQL end. It only sends back the stuff you want. So all the processing, what it is done at their end rather than your end. So the amount of stuff that gets transmitted is much reduced. The speed of GraphQL is pretty performant compared to everything else. So it's not you're not going to say, nice interface, shit times. And again, they have continents. There's an example of an embedded. I've got an embedded structure in the thing. So you can query it to your heart's content. It says, I can't do mutations in here because he won't let you. Because somebody will just bugger up his database given half the chance. And if you do something wrong, it gives you an error. So your JSON parser should allow for the fact that there may be a field called error. Usually if there's no error, it won't be there. If there is an error, it will be there. There is a third thing they send back, but I've never encountered it. I can't remember what it was. So, and that is roughly GraphQL. And also you have here the schema, which is quite good if you can't remember what the hell's happening. You just look this up. Saves you going through pages and pages of code looking for something. And that is done by no effort. It's all done for you. Anything else I can think of about this? There will be, but it'll be on the way home. And that's it, really, apart from, oops, back here. Can't remember what's next. Yes, so we've had Dismal fail the time, which actually bloody worked, much to my surprise, and the law of demos. The probability of demo working is inversely proportional to the number of people watching. So there we are.
May I double check if you're okay to take questions?
Of course I am. Go ahead.
I recently wrote an API. I wrote a server backend that wraps a database basically for someone who wrote a mobile application. And there was a little bit of back and forth about what the API must give the mobile application, what the queries are going to be, and whatever. How easy, do you have a feel, would it be for a mobile developer? Like, are there libraries that are going to be available in use Java? So not Kotlin, but Java.
Yeah, there will be. Probably it's a Kotlin one. Let's find out.
It's going to make it easy.
GraphQL.org has a front page where it gives you a list of some of the implementations. Where was it? It's on one of these pages. One more. I've seen this page. Here we are. Java and Kotlin,
Nice.
and Swift and Objective-C.
So my next question
Uh-huh.
would be what it would take to implement on my side. I've basically using SQL Alchemy as an ORM, and I'm pulling data in from a database and then dumping it into a JSON document.
Yeah.
How much work will be done for me to take that query and if I
The first fatality at a talk.
Please do not set that record.
if I take that query
Mm-hmm.
and I give it a model that's, I don't know, whatever, a Python class instance or a SQL Alchemy ORM instance, is it gonna pull out the fields
Yes.
for me and I do nothing?
Well,
do I
when you
need to
define
find-
your structure of the type that you're returning, you just populate those fields.
Okay,
And then at their end, they say which of the fields they want.
all right.
One of the
So as long as I populate all the fields, something else is going to choose which field, see what they've asked for,
and then
give
just
them
return
those
that.
ones.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
One of the design things for GraphQL was your API wasn't fixed because you can add fields. There's also a way of if you have a structure with a field you're no longer using, you can define it as at symbol deprecated. So if people still fill it up, that's fine, but nothing will happen.
Okay.
So you can change your side of stuff as often as you want, and it doesn't affect everybody else, because all queries go through /query,
Okay.
so that they don't have to change endpoints.
Nice. This looks really nice.
Mm-hmm. Just looking to see what there is. They haven't mentioned the COBOL one, which is a shame, because it would fit neatly in that little bit that's missing. Any other questions?
So at the beginning of your talk, you mentioned sort of web APIs with SOAP. And
Yeah.
what is painfully obvious is that you can ask an API for, I'd like to know about this. And it says, yeah, sure, I have all of that.
Yeah.
Is that a problem with API in general, or just the very obtuse implementation of some endpoints?
It's the design of APIs, in that there is no, with REST APIs and SOAP and things, there's no way of telling it, this is what I want. All you're saying is give me the lot, and I'll pick the bits I want.
Because I know when I'm querying, well, I guess it's the same thing, query specific information about pull requests on GitHub using an API, it returns JSON to me.
Yeah.
It returns a ton of JSON. And I guess, I'm answering my own question here, looking at what GraphQL is doing. It's not so much saying, I want, it's a way of forcing the querier to say what specifically they want to know. You don't query and say, give me everything. You have to actually say, I want to know about this in particular.
Yes, what you have changed the power balance. What you are saying is, if you are the one calling a GraphQL thing, you are saying my demands are as follows. Whereas with an API, they're saying my demands are as follows, here it is.
So it's a bit of a specification level enforcement of, let's have some sensible interchange.
Yes.
Which is probably a very good thing.
It is, because also if you go doing mobile stuff, you really want to cut down the amount of shit you're sending backwards and forwards.
And also I'm curious, I don't know if you ever delved so deep as to know why they call it GraphQL?
No, didn't read that bit. You can talk amongst yourselves and I'll dig it out, but you're all just capable of digging it out as well.
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Risk of lowering the tone. Andy and I,
Nothing wrong with that.
we were on Hello World like 6 weeks ago. So
I've been thinking one, but I wasn't brave enough.
Okay.
So
No such thing as
maybe
a
I can
stupid
talk this
question.
through and like you tell me halfway through like can go home and drunk or
Okay.
like whatever. But so we did APIs the other day for the first time, right? So my understanding is that say you're doing it in React, you would fetch an API endpoint which is predetermined to you. You can't fix.
Mhm.
You react to that, and you say, well, I'm going to take that data structure, and you have to take it all and store it somehow, and then pick what you want from it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying with this, you pretty much get to write your own endpoint.
No, you get to write what comes back.
What comes back?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
The endpoint is always /query.
yeah. So
But for security, it doesn't have to be /query. It can be /donkey.
Yeah, I
So-
get what you're saying though. So we're only getting what we're asking for.
Yes.
but conventionally, you would have to take the whole lot and just
Yeah.
take it right.
Which,
So
as you can see in the
that's
case
great.
of the property management thing, is a lot of shit.
So if you were querying like a blockchain, for example, conventionally you're taking shitloads of information you don't need
Yeah.
if you're just interested in 3 things.
Yeah.
And all right, cool.
Yeah, we're taking like 2% information that we need, but we're
Great.
getting all of the information that we need.
Yeah. I mean, the query from the property management system, it tells you things like when the rate code was set for the room, and things like description of the room and what's in the room. Does it have a jacuzzi? Does it have a swimming pool? Whatever. And I'm not interested now. If you're checking somebody in, you want to give me the room ID so I can look up to see if it's empty and clean.
Actually, I guess that's the point. If you had you were the source of information and you had a query coming in saying, hey, I want to know about this person and what I want to know is their surname. And you put in your response, well, here's all the information I have about that person. Would that actually be invalid to the requesting client? Or would the requesting client then just have to deal with it and you could lazily implement your server-side response?
You only get back what you ask for. So if you don't ask for it, it's not going to come back.
But if you're a lazy server-side implementer,
That's for everything.
and you
No,
send
but the
back
whole point about the
everything-
GraphQL bit is it takes in the stuff that the requester wants
All right, so the person.
and only gives that back.
Alright, so you as a user of the client implementation, doesn't matter what the server sends back, so long as the server's data is populated on the fields, you'll only see what you wanted to see.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like for my example for the booking reservation, if there was a query which said, get room ID, and I give it a booking reference, all it needs to do is return a single string, which is the room ID.
So from a security point of view, it's more secure because you have to know what to ask for in the first place. You can't get superfluous. You can't get all the information by just saying, "Give me everything."
Well, you can if you allow people into slash.
Right.
So you don't. What you can do is, I mean, in your program, normally, well, in Go, you have a little block that says which endpoints you allow. You just comment out that it allows slash, and you change query to something really obscure. Or you have authentication as well, because you put authentication in basic auth in your headers, or have an auth string as part of the request.
So that seems really useful for like someone consuming an API, but what's the effect on the server?
The effect in the server is less than it would be if you're using a slow language. Say something like Python. Python will run 1/70th of the speed of Rust. So the effect of the server above language choice is much more than the effect in the server of GraphQL. But it doesn't make much difference. People have done tests and they find it's roughly the same as calling a normal API. What you save is, if you've got a slow connection, the transmission time.
So long as the server eventually doesn't connect.
Yeah. That's it.
So I guess war stories. Have there been instances where you thought, which have specific story where GraphQL was actually solved something against an alternative?
I have for me, in that I have gone away from sending back piles of shit that I don't need when I'm calling up the property management systems.
Why this specific example? Was that a project?
No, because that's what I'm working on
Right.
at the moment. The trouble is, APIs will be around probably forever, because somebody will say, that's how we've always done it. Computing business, you think, is sort of go ahead and flashy and new, but then Python, 1995, Java, 1995. These are all old languages. Rust is near 2009 and Go is 2009. PHP is 1992. That's a 30-year-old language. COBOL is still used and it's heading towards a 65-year-old language. Erlang, 1984. D came around out of C. This is a bit of education for you lot. You can spout it
There's a lot
tomorrow.
of acronyms that have been said in the last half hour that mean nothing to me. I will say.
Right.
I was going to make one up and just see what happens.
MBLIAS. Many big letters in a string. That'll get you through all sorts of questions. Yes, back in the 60s, end of the 60s, C was invented by Dennis Ritchie and That's it. Couldn't remember the other bloke. There's an interesting story about Dennis Ritchie. He was round visiting his nephew once, who was at college. He was at college as a football player, and he said, "Hey, they've just been teaching us C as part of our course. Do you know anything about it?" Dennis Ritchie said, "I invented it." Great line. Yes, but at the time, C is based on PDP assembler language. If you look at PDP assembler language and C, they do all the same things. It's just that C is much more transportable everywhere else. And out of C, there was a sort of family of stuff like B and BCPL and D, sort of all came around at the same time. BCPL is an interesting language. You can multiply anything by anything. So you can take a function and multiply it by another function. It'll by hand go, yeah. And it'll say, where do you want me to put it? Stick in the third function. So you can bomb your program reliably. So that's D. D is just one of these C things. There was B and there was NB, and somebody thought, let's bring this up to date with D.
And R just skipped a few letters.
No, R is a statistics
R
language.
is the sequel to a language called S.
Yeah.
R!
R, if you're doing statistical stuff and data analysis, you either do it with Python or you do it with R. If your data is in a nice form, you do it in R. If your data is a mess, you do it in Python.
Most of the time your data's a mess.
Most of the time your data is a mess, but Greg, who I know, who used to be a sysadmin, is now does data science. He knows how to use sed and things like that. So he will take a mess, do a few sed commands, and it comes out really lovely, and he can put it straight into R. I do not have that skill. Yeah, I should learn it, because it's when you see him. It's one of these things when you see somebody who is an expert doing it, you think, I am nowhere close. I once played Grandmaster at chess. I used to go to the Oxford Chess Club, and they had a rule that if you turned up and and all the other boards were full, you waited and you played the first person that came in the door. So one day I was waiting. The next person that came in the door was a bloke called John Nunn, who was a grandmaster at chess. And I make no claims to any chess ability, but to get tanked that quickly and that easily was actually one hell of an education.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, right.
Miles, you want to do closing notes? Or recommend the...
Yeah, do closing notes. So, right. Thank you very much, Douglas. That was a really enjoyable talk. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. We are going to be going to the Blue Blazer pub. Thank you to all 0 of you who are watching the live stream. Thank you to all, hopefully, many thousands of you who will be watching this video in the future when TOTES achieves world domination. I believe we are. Do we have any talks scheduled for next month?
We shall be doing another event next month. Well, step into frame. We'll be doing another event next month. We'll be returning to the start of the cycle. Lightning talks. Anything, again, on the open source, open technology, open hardware, open communities, so long as the idea is about the openness and sharing information and working together. By all means, we're interested from the most beginner to the most advanced. Bring it. You'd be surprised at what you take for granted that you think everyone knows, and tons of people are actually interested in learning from your own mouth. So please do get in touch, and hopefully see you at the next event.
See you at the next event, which will probably be next door. Oh, thank you.
Oh,
yes.
right, yeah.
Yes, okay. Yes, I have. Right, but also now I'm back. Anyway, okay. So the next event will probably, it'll be next month. So was it third Wednesday of the month? Yeah.
Third Wednesday of the month, Codebase normally, Code Clan alternatively, we'll be working on that.
Yeah, one of the two, code something. And so watch the meetup group, tell all your friends. If you have a lightning talk, so 5 to 10 minutes. We're not particularly strict about timing. Please suggest it on the GitHub page. And thank you very much for coming, everyone, and see you in the pub. Thank you once again to Douglas.
I would say something about giving talks. You do not have to be an expert to give a talk, because you'll be giving a talk to people who know even less than you. So don't let ignorance hold you back.
This is very true. It's also a learning opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, you also tend to learn more because you're trying to, check
Answer
your
questions.
slides and work out what people need to know.
All right, thanks everyone.
Oops.